The Seattle skyline pierced through the morning fog as Natalie Rivers adjusted her blazer one final time before stepping out of the taxi. 3 years had transformed her from a heartbroken young woman into a confident business owner. But seeing the gleaming Blackwood Industries tower still made her stomach clench with memories she'd worked hard to bury. "Mama, is this where we're going to have our meeting?" Oliver asked, his small hand gripping hers as they approached the imposing glass entrance. At 3 years old, he possessed an uncanny ability to sense her moods, and she could feel his curious eyes studying her face. "Yes, sweetheart. Remember what we practiced? You'll sit quietly with your coloring books while Mama talks to the important people about our cafe." She smoothed his dark hair, noting how it caught the light the same way his father's once had. That resemblance had been both a blessing and a curse over the years. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt eternal. Natalie's pastry business, Sweet Harbor, had grown from a small coastal cafe to a beloved local chain, and now she was ready for the next step. The partnership proposal in her briefcase represented months of preparation, financial projections, and dreams of expanding into corporate catering. She had no idea that the CEO reviewing her proposal would be the man who had shattered her world. The receptionist led them through marble corridors adorned with modern art. Oliver's eyes widened at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, and he pressed his nose against the glass, leaving tiny fingerprints that made Natalie smile despite her nerves. "Ms. Rivers, they're ready for you in the conference room." Her heart stopped the moment she walked through those mahogany doors. Marcus Blackwood stood at the head of a polished table, his back to her as he gestured toward a presentation screen. The years had been kind to him. His shoulders seemed broader, his presence more commanding, but she would recognize that silhouette anywhere. When he turned around, his prepared smile froze completely. The presentation remote slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the table as his green eyes widened in recognition. For a moment, neither of them breathed. "Natalie," he whispered, her name barely audible across the silent room. The other executives shifted uncomfortably, sensing the sudden tension. Oliver, oblivious to the undercurrents, tugged on her skirt. "Mama, can I sit by the window?" Marcus's gaze dropped to the little boy, and Natalie watched the color drain from his face. Oliver looked up at the stranger with innocent curiosity, revealing eyes that were unmistakably Marcus's, the same shade of forest green, the same long lashes, even the same slight upturn at the corners. "My God," Marcus breathed, gripping the edge of the table. His knees seemed to buckle as the realization hit him. "How old is he?" 3, Natalie replied quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. The math was simple, devastating, and undeniable. Marcus sank into his chair, his successful businessman facade crumbling as he stared at the child he'd never known existed. Oliver, sensing something important was happening, moved closer to his mother. "I think Natalie said to the room of confused executives, we should reschedule this meeting." But as she gathered Oliver's things with trembling hands, she knew there would be no running away this time. The past had finally caught up with them both, and her son deserved answers she wasn't sure she was ready to give. Unveiled truths 3 years earlier, Marcus had stood in his penthouse office, hands shaking as he deleted Natalie's number from his phone. Victoria Blackwood, his late parents' business partner and the woman who'd raised him after their deaths, sat across from his desk with a manila folder that had destroyed his world in minutes. "The photographs don't lie, Marcus," she'd said, her voice cold and calculating. "Your precious Natalie has been seeing someone else for months." The private investigator confirmed it. The images had been damning Natalie laughing with another man at a restaurant, walking hand in hand through Pike Place Market, embracing outside what appeared to be a hotel. Marcus's heart had shattered with each photograph, but Victoria wasn't. "Finished. If you continue this relationship, I'll have no choice but to expose her infidelity publicly. Your parents built this company on family values and integrity. A scandal like this will destroy everything they worked for." She'd leaned forward, her steel-gray eyes boring into him. "Choose wisely, Marcus. The company and your inheritance, or a woman who's clearly moved on." Now 3 years later, Marcus sat in his business partner James Chun's office. his head in his hands after the morning's revelation. James poured 2 glasses of whiskey, despite the early hour. "You look like you've seen a ghost," James observed, settling into the chair across from Marcus. They'd been friends since college, building Blackwood Industries together from a small startup into a tech empire. "Worse. I've seen my son," Marcus's voice cracked as he explained the morning's events. James listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. When Marcus finished, James walked to his filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "There's something you need to see. I've been holding on to this for months, waiting for the right time." The folder contained phone records, email logs, and surveillance footage from 3 years ago. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized Victoria's digital fingerprints throughout the evidence. "She intercepted every call Natalie made to you," James explained quietly. "The investigator she hired? He worked for her exclusively. Those photographs were staged. The man with Natalie was her cousin visiting from Portland. I have the family photos to prove it." Marcus felt the room spinning. "How long have you known?" "I started investigating Victoria's business practices last year when some financial irregularities surfaced. This was collateral damage I stumbled upon." James pulled out more documents. "She's been embezzling from the company for years, Marcus. She knew if Natalie became your wife, she'd lose control of both you and the business." The weight of his actions crashed down on Marcus like a tsunami. While he'd been protecting Natalie from a scandal that never existed, she'd been alone and pregnant, believing he'd abandoned her without cause. Meanwhile, across town in her hotel room, Natalie tucked Oliver into bed after a long day of explanations he was too young to fully understand. She'd told him that the man they'd met was someone Mama used to know. Someone who might want to be their friend. "Will we see him again, Mama?" Oliver asked, clutching his stuffed elephant. "I don't know, sweetheart," Natalie whispered, kissing his forehead. But even as she said it, she knew their lives had changed forever. The look of devastation on Marcus's face when he'd realized Oliver was his son had shattered every defense she'd built around her heart. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please don't leave. We need to talk." "No, you have no reason to trust me, but I can explain everything." Broken foundations. Victoria Blackwood's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her mahogany desk as she reviewed the morning's security footage. Seeing Natalie Rivers walk into their building had sent ice through her veins, but witnessing Marcus's reaction to the child had been her worst nightmare realized. She picked up her phone and dialed her assistant. "Kevin, I need you to pull everything on Sweet Harbor CAF. Financial records, health department inspections, anything that could be problematic, and get me Detective Morrison on the line." What Victoria didn't know was that Detective Ray Morrison had been investigating her for months. The Financial Crimes Unit had been building a case against her embezzlement scheme. Her desperate phone call would be the final piece they needed. Across town, Natalie sat in the hospital emergency room, holding Oliver's fevered hand as they waited for test results. Her son had spiked a temperature that morning, and his persistent cough had escalated into difficulty breathing. "Ash!" When her phone rang and Marcus's name appeared, she almost didn't answer. "Natalie, I got your message." "Which hospital?" His voice was tight with concern. "Seattle Children's, room 34. But Marcus, you don't have to. I'm already in the parking lot." 10 minutes later, Marcus burst through the door carrying coffee and a small teddy bear. The sight of Oliver, pale and struggling with an oxygen mask, brought him to his knees beside the bed. "What did the doctors say?" he asked, his hand hovering uncertainly over Oliver's small form. "Pneumonia. They're starting antibiotics, but..." Natalie's voice broke. "I've been doing this alone for 3 years. I'm scared." Without thinking, Marcus reached over and covered her hand with his. "You're not alone anymore." Dr. Rebecca Santos, the attending physician, entered with a warm smile. "Good news, the chest x-rays show it's responding well to treatment. Should be much better by tomorrow." She looked between Marcus and Natalie curiously. "Are you Dad?" Marcus looked to Natalie, who nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, the word feeling foreign but right on his tongue, as Oliver slept peacefully that evening. Natalie found herself opening up to Marcus in ways she'd sworn she never would again. They talked in hushed tones about the past 3 years, her struggles as a single mother, building her business from nothing, the sleepless nights wondering if she'd made the right choices. "Tried to find you," Marcus said quietly, "after Victoria told me about about the other man. I hired investigators, but every trail led nowhere." "What other man?" Natalie's confusion was genuine, and Marcus felt another piece of his world shift. Before he could answer, Tom Rivers appeared in the doorway. Natalie's father was a tall, weathered man who'd spent his life as a fisherman before retiring. His eyes went straight to Marcus with unmistakable recognition and rage. "You have some nerve showing up here," Tom growled, his voice carrying decades of watching his daughter cry herself to sleep. "Dad, please no, Natalie. This man disappeared when you needed him most, left you to raise his son alone while he played CEO." Tom stepped closer to Marcus, his fists clenched. "Do you have any idea what you put her through? She called you for weeks, showed up at your office pregnant and scared, only to be turned away by security." Marcus felt his world tilt. "She came to the office 50 times if it was once. Your people told her you'd given strict instructions never to let her up." Tom's voice shook with contained fury. "She gave birth to your son in a charity clinic because she couldn't afford better. Worked 3 jobs while going to culinary school. At night, all because the man who claimed to love her vanished like smoke." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Victoria hadn't just manipulated him, she'd actively prevented Natalie from reaching him. Every security protocol, every blocked call, every unanswered message had been orchestrated. "I didn't know," Marcus whispered, his face pale. "God help me, I didn't know any of it." Grace Kim, Natalie's best friend and business partner, arrived with overnight bags and immediately sensed the tension. She'd been Natalie's rock through everything, helping build Sweet Harbor from a dream into reality. "Whatever's happening here," Grace said firmly, looking between the 3 adults. "That little boy needs stability, not more drama. If you're going to be in his life," she pointed at Marcus, "then prove you deserve to be. Don't just show up when it's convenient." As the evening wore on, Oliver stirred awake, his fever finally broken. His eyes found Marcus sitting beside his bed, and with the innocent directness only children possess, he asked, "Are you going to stay this time?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus knew his answer would determine everything that came next. The reckoning, the federal courthouse buzzed with activity as Detective Ray Morrison led Victoria Blackwood through the halls in handcuffs. Kevin Zhao, her former assistant, walked beside the prosecution team with boxes of evidence that would seal her fate. His conscience had finally won the battle against his fear when he'd witnessed Victoria trying to sabotage Natalie's business license. "She made me intercept calls, forge documents, even hire actors to stage those photographs," Kevin testified. Before the grand jury, Mrs. Blackwood said it was to protect the company's reputation, but I knew it was really about control. 2 weeks after Victoria's arrest, Marcus sat across from Judge Patricia Wang in family court, his hands trembling as he filed for joint custody of Oliver. Natalie had agreed to supervised visitation while they worked through the complex emotions surrounding their situation, but the legal proceedings felt surreal. "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Wang said sternly, "we're asking for parental rights to a child you've never supported financially or emotionally. What assurance can you give this court? That you won't disappear from his life again?" Marcus's attorney presented the evidence of Victoria's manipulation, but the judge's expression remained skeptical. It was Oliver himself who changed everything. When Maria Santos, the court-appointed social worker, interviewed him, his simple honesty cut through all the legal complexity. Like Marcus, Oliver had told her, playing with blocks in the family services office, "He stayed with me when I was sick, and he knows about dinosaurs. Mama cries less when he's around." Dr. Rebecca Santos, now serving as the family's therapist rather than Oliver's doctor, facilitated tense sessions between Marcus and Natalie. The small office felt claustrophobic as years of pain and misunderstanding surfaced. "I keep expecting you two leave again," Natalie admitted during their 3rd session. "Every time you don't show up exactly on time, I think this is it. This is when you decide we're too complicated." Marcus leaned forward, his voice raw with emotion. "I've lost 3 years with my son because I trusted the wrong person. I'm not losing another day, but I understand why you can't trust me yet." Trust isn't just given back, Dr. Santos observed. It has to be rebuilt brick by brick, day by day. The breakthrough came during an unexpected moment. Oliver had been staying overnight with Marcus for the first time when he woke from a nightmare about monsters. Instead of calling for his mother as usual, he crawled into Marcus's bed, seeking comfort. "The scary things can't get me when you're here," Oliver whispered. And Marcus felt his heart crack open with a love so fierce it took his breath away. When Natalie arrived the next morning to pick up Oliver, she found them asleep together. Marcus's protective arm around the small boy who looked so much like him. The sight brought tears she'd been holding back for weeks. "He's been having those nightmares since the hospital," she said quietly when Marcus woke. "He's never slept through one before." As autumn progressed, their co-parenting arrangement found its rhythm. Marcus learned Oliver's favorite bedtime stories, his fear of thunderstorms, and his obsession with construction trucks. Natalie watched her son bloom under his father's attention, saw him gain confidence and security. She'd never been able to provide alone the day Victoria was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. She requested to speak with Marcus. He found her in an orange jumpsuit, looking older and more fragile than he'd ever seen her. "I raised you from nothing," she said, her voice hollow. "Everything I did was to protect what your parents built. You destroyed lives, Victoria. You stole my son's first steps, his first words, his first 3 years from me." Her facade finally cracked. "I was terrified of losing you like I lost them. Your parents were everything to me, brother, sister-in-law, best friends. When they died, you became my whole world. I couldn't bear the thought of sharing you." The first time, Marcus saw her not as a villain, but as a broken woman whose grief had twisted into something toxic. "You didn't have to share me," he said sadly. "You just had to let me grow up." That evening, he found Natalie and Oliver at the waterfront park where she'd brought their son countless times over the years. Oliver was feeding ducks while Natalie sat on their usual bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Room for one more?" Marcus asked, and she scooted over to make space beside her. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son's pure joy in simple pleasures. Finally, Natalie spoke. "I'm ready to try," she said softly. "Not just co-parenting, all of it." "You are." Marcus took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. "I've been ready since the moment I saw you walk back into my life.